Okay, awesome. Okay, hi everyone, I'm Sarah Cipkar. I'm the founder and CEO of Resimate. I'm also a local Windsorite, and I built my own backyard home, so that's why I'm here tonight. I reached out to Marla and Dale, well, it must be a couple of months ago, and I'll explain a little bit more what we're doing, but what ADUs are, everything like that. But they kind of said, maybe there are people in our network that would want to learn about additional dwelling units, backyard homes, that kind of thing. So I figured I'll give a presentation, and then if you guys have any questions, and we are doing a bit of a pilot program right now through some funding we have, which I'll explain at the end as well, that some of you might be interested in. So how many of you are familiar with backyard homes? Like, yeah, loosely, yeah. Well, more or less. Okay. So when I say ADU, that means additional dwelling unit or accessory dwelling unit. I'm meaning the detached version. So I'm really looking at like the ones that you would like pop down in your backyard. People also do have internal or attached units. My company doesn't focus so much on those, but I'm happy to chat about them. They're a great opportunity as well. But they're less easy to standardize, and they can be really house by house specific in terms of adding an additional unit. So I'm kind of talking about the like standalone units that you can add in your backyard. So, okay, I will go to the next slide. And I haven't used paper slideshow. I'm used to presenting on Zoom. So, so I'm like, next page, everyone. Okay, so this is a picture of me. This is my backyard. So I built my own detached ADU in 2020. I was actually the first in the city of Windsor. I worked with a couple of good friends of the family, who both helped me to design and build it. It's 430 square feet, and it took me almost a year actually to build. And it was pretty challenging, and it was at a time when things were like, financial institutions didn't know what we were dealing with. The appraisers were like, what the heck is this? The number of times I had to say, it's like a garage that's not attached to my house, but people live in it like a cottage. Like, I had to explain what the concept was. So yeah, so fast forward now 4 years, there's a little bit more knowledge, and now governments at all levels are recognizing these units. But it took me a long time to kind of navigate that space. And so that ended up making me really passionate about backyard homes. And so the other hat that I wear actually is I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Toronto in the housing space, and I'm studying these units as well as homeowners. So I kind of am approaching it both from like the micro, kind of on the ground with my company, but then also the more macro level about how we can change policy. So I can talk about that all day. I won't go down too far down that road. But the next page actually is like why ADUs, which covers a lot of that. So it's just for people who are interested in maybe some of the benefits, or when you're talking about it with people. One of the major things that we're, I think, faced with in Canada right now is not having enough housing. And so I really think like the why ADUs, for me, it's kind of like helping homeowners to become more motivated, more empowered to build their own units, simply because we don't have enough housing. So we need to kind of like decentralize development and kind of empower homeowners, property owners to feel like they can add units to their property. They're great for multi-generational living. I know for me, I currently have it tenanted with actually a friend who, he lives there right now, but I often make jokes that maybe my daughter will live there one day when she's older, or maybe my dad when he decides he can't have his house anymore and needs like a small space but still needs his privacy. So there's that kind of flexibility. They're also very connection oriented because they're ground level. And I think people really miss this because people are like used to apartment buildings, and some people like that, but sometimes it feels like you're a box in a sky. And so people are used to more of like, they want that more like connection to nature, or the ability to walk outside your door and see what's going on. And so they're a great opportunity for that. They also add rental options, I think, in desirable neighborhoods that are dominated by high home ownership levels. And that's, I think, a really important piece, because it gives the kind of like that diversity of people, both in income and just in terms of like, for example, there's a lot of seniors who have too much house and they don't want to leave their neighborhood. So these provide an opportunity for them to then to downsize, but actually stay in their neighborhood and stay connected. So, and then for the, I guess, purposes of more on the investor side of things, there's a lot of economic reasons for ADUs. They're a wealth builder for homeowners, but even for investors, and we'll kind of get into this a little bit tonight, you already own the land. You already own that, you have access to it. So that land acquisition cost isn't there, and so you could just add an existing unit and improve your cash flow on that property. On a more macro level, they do generate more tax revenue, which is, I know, not everyone's favorite thing, but for municipalities that are struggling right now with deficits, high costs, inflation, this is a way to add more tax revenue with infill development, meaning they already have existing sewers, infrastructure, so it's not sprawl kind of development. And then lastly, it gets us to the environmental reasons. Generally, adding this type of gentrification is the term that people have been using, is better, again, than those kind of like sprawled out. And I say generally better is because it does use that existing infrastructure. New building code is much more energy efficient, so new units themselves are really well, like my ADU is very well insulated. And so there's a kind of a benefit there. So that's kind of the general, I kind of breezed through that, but I'm happy to talk more about any of those things if you guys have questions. So the next page is Resimate and kind of the company. So in 2022, I got together with a team and we were funded through CMHC to develop a tool online where you can type in your address, it pulls up your backyard and shows you your buildable area and what you can fit in the backyard. So if you go actually to the next page, there's a little picture. This is a property where we showcase, and it's not in color so you can't see it as well, but there's the buildable area at the back here. It's kind of like a pie-shaped lot. And then all of the boxes that are outlined there, they're actually units. So we can actually test to see, okay, does this unit at this square footage fit in this buildable area? And so we've mapped, we at the time in 2023 2022, we had mapped 30 cities across Canada. We weren't able to keep them all online, but we have about like 20 now. Windsor being one of them, Toronto being one of them. I'm trying to think, Barrie, there's a bunch, London and Ontario. And essentially, if you type in an address, you can then see if it's suitable, what the details are, and then which models that we have. And like that final connection that we made was to a lot of the modular builders. There's a lot of new manufacturers entering the space who essentially they build units, let's say between 250 square feet and 500, 600 square feet. They build them offsite in factories, and then they can essentially put them on a trailer bed and then crane them in place. And so what we decided to do was, and why we created Resimate, was to be able to connect those manufacturers directly to the property owners and really streamline the process. Because right now, if you wanted to do that, you'd have to reach out to them. One of you guys would then have to, look up your zoning bylaws, figure out permitting, figure out site servicing, figure out crane, figure out delivery. We, for example, have one builder all the way out in Calgary. So if they, wanted to ship their units, they would have to then figure out all of the zoning bylaws and the processes in Windsor. And that creates a big challenge for a lot of ADU manufacturers. And so our value is basically being that trusted service partner that can connect the manufacturer with the on-the-ground industry experts and being able to facilitate that delivery. So really, I think the future of ADUs is, you can build a custom one. You can still go to a contractor. You can have them build, like I did, a 430 square foot unit. But there's a cost, there's a time, there's an additional resources that are often needed. And I really think the future of housing is really around the modular piece and being able to just kind of like order one, see it come in, and it's much less disruptive. So that's kind of the premise of Resimate and why we had reached out to Marta, because we are looking at kind of entering the Windsor space. I'm a Windsor local, but the rest of my team is across the country, and we currently have funding from CMHC to be able to essentially accelerate the building of these types of units.
Did you say that this,
Yeah.
the app, for lack of a better word,
Yeah.
that's operational in Calgary as well? That's one of the cities?
I believe so, yes. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Calgary's on now. I know Kelowna is, Vancouver, but I think Calgary is. Well, we do have a builder in Calgary as well, so I can, yeah. So the next page kind of gives an overview of like what we coordinate. So like I said, there's a streamlined process that essentially analyzes your lot, does like a feasibility analysis. You can see that online. We tend to do then a deeper dive where we would then, if like, let's say you reach out to me after this, you're like, I have these 3 properties. We have the capability of producing like automated maps and stuff, and we can show you, different units, how they fit, what it looks like. And we help kind of determine like the final costs and for both the unit and also the site preparation. Usually the site preparation we're seeing coming in at around like 40 to 50,000 just for the site preparation alone. I have a slide on that, so I won't get too far into it, but we coordinate all those pieces so you don't have to kind of do it yourself. And then from there, on the financing piece, the financing piece, we're also able to coordinate. We do have some, what we're noticing is that I'll say like big banks are just starting to recognize the value of ADUs, but what really the challenge with modular is being able to, there's no collateral until the unit is actually in place. And so banks don't want to give you the money up front to pay for the unit to the builder. They want to see it in place. And so what we are able to do is offer bridge or construction financing through a private lender for a shortened period of time. So then when the unit is actually on site, you can then refinance with the value of the new detached ADU. That is starting to change a little bit, and part of the pilot program, which I'll talk about, is that we're able to offer kind of like a preferred rate for that period of time as part of like one of our incentives. And then we coordinate permit submission and approval, get all the drawings, documentation needed together. And lastly, we coordinate both the offsite construction and the site preparation work. And the good thing about that is in a traditional build, everything happens sequentially, one thing after another. Whereas with a modular build, things are happening in parallel. So the site work is happening at the same time that the unit is being built, and that kind of accelerates the construction of the unit. Great question. Ideally, 3 to 4 months. However, sometimes there's a period where the municipality takes a long time for permit approval. I've had permits take like 8 months, which is crazy, but apparently the City of Windsor is now fully staffed because what the challenge was is that they were losing a lot of building inspectors and plans examiners. I've recently heard that they're like almost up to capacity, so the time should be shorter. But for example, the actual build itself should only really take like 4 to 6 weeks. And then if you're able to do the site work at the same time, we're usually able to get it done in like 3 to 4 months, like all in. So yeah.
And what's the lead time to, let's say you want to have an ADU and you have these specifications, what is the lead time to get it from the factory?
It depends on the builder. Some builders are really fast and they can do it in a month. We have one builder who's like a 3-month lead time. We have another builder who's more of a 4 to 5 month lead time. They kind of actually are almost full for the year already. So it really depends on the builder. Yeah, because they kind of had their own lead time. What we do, what our plan with our builders is let's say like we have a service agreement in place, we've started the permits, they put us in the build queue. And they've kind of said even that they would prioritize some of our builds, but they essentially start on that. Because a lot of the builders have like modular, it's hard to describe, where it's like they can build the base and that will be the same, like they can do that and it's not going to change very much, so they can build the whole thing and then at the end it's like, okay, we're good to go. They just build the interior. So it's almost like it's like quasi on demand almost, where they have it ready and they just kind of fill in the interior after once they get the specs and the permit gets approved and everything like that. So it really depends on the builder, but we aim to be within that like 3 to 4 month, max like 6 months. So, okay, so if you go to the next page on the project financing piece. So traditionally, and this question always gets asked. This is part of our pilot program, but this is something that we're piloting because we want to be able to roll this out more broadly across the country as kind of like a financial kind of incentives for people, in the sense that existing traditional instruments are cash, HELOC, cash out refinance. Those are difficult unless you have the money, like you have all of the equity in the property, all that kind of stuff. And again, it's harder with bigger banks to be able to get those loans. We again have access to a private construction bridge financing product. We're able to subsidize it to get like a 3.99 or 5.99 for 6 or 12 months at term, and then it becomes refinanced. we've heard from a lot of people that financing tends to be one of the biggest barriers. So we've just kind of committed to saying that like we'll help in any way that we can connect you to kind of like a lender who understands what we're doing and sees value in the project. So what's needed, that box there, is really just to qualify for that type of construction bridge financing, which I can talk about after if anyone's interested. Okay, so I'm going to get into the Resimate Investor Pilot Project because I really did want this opportunity to kind of, for people who are interested in this, we want to install 5 units, or we want to have at least 5 projects started by August 31st. Our goal, and that's in Windsor. We're kind of pitching this to groups of investors in different cities. So we have one in St. Catharines, we've had a group in Hamilton, and we're trying to get to 5 units in each of the cities. And the rationale is because the one builder that we're working with, Eden Dwellings, which I think they're coming up in terms of their builds, they are willing to essentially, if we buy units in bulk, give discounts on the project. And then because we have we have funding to be able to offer financial incentives, we are also able to then double that discount. So essentially we're able to offer a 20% discount on all of the units, like on a per unit basis. And we're looking for people who are interested in testing out basically a detached ADU on their properties. So this is kind of like the details, it just kind of goes over it really quickly. And we said 5 ADUs in Windsor, and so we still have some spots available, so I wanted to throw it out there. And if you go to the next page, it kind of gives a little bit more detail, so 20% total discount per unit. And then we're working with the service partner in Windsor, Laneway Homes, and they build custom ADUs. I worked with them for a number of years. I did consulting on a number of projects. So they're really a great partner because they know how to build them, from the ground up, so to speak, but they really want to test out modular units as well. Because for them, it's an advantage if they can offer modular units as part of their offering just in general, where they can do it faster, they like the product. So Dan Radmore is the owner there, and he's been really excited about this as well. And then the second thing that we're offering as part of this is that we know that financing can be a challenge. So like I said, we're offering construction financing, about 3.99 for 6 months or 5.99 for 12 months. Or let's say financing isn't a barrier for you. You have maybe access to financing, or you've just sold a property or something like that. We are offering a rental top-up instead. So $300 per month for 24 months. The goal here really is to decrease the monthly costs and increase the net cash flow, because what we're noticing and the feedback that we're getting is that sometimes the numbers just don't work. And so we're trying to figure out how can we work with investors to kind of get these incentives, because the way that we see it is that if we can incentivize a bunch of real estate investors who already own you guys are small scale property owners who are able to say, okay, yeah, I'll add a unit. You could add hundreds of units in a city. And so it's really trying to prove out the model that this can be an effective way to add housing units in a more decentralized format. And so on the next page, we'll get into Eden a little bit, but this is supposed to be a little video, which is not, it's just an image, but you guys could imagine. It's kind of like how they put it together. And then if you go to the next page after that, it says like why Eden ADUs. And so Eden Dwellings is a company out of Toronto. They actually own a custom residential home building business. I know the owner, we've been up to their factory a few times. They own both they're from Pure Building Group, and they also own Cube Building Systems, which is a modular building systems company. So that's like kind of the modular technology that fuels the residential home building. So they do everything from like 20,000 square foot, homes to like suburb, developments, like the suburban kind of tract developments. And Justin, the owner, decided to like pivot into detached ADUs, specifically modular, and tried to build them with really high quality, durable materials, almost using some of their more like commercial project materials. So if you look here, you can't tell from the picture, but if you go on their site, you can see it. It's steel framing, it's spray foam insulation, it's like a type of durable vinyl on the exterior. I'm blanking on the name. Basically the units actually sit on helical piles, which are big metal screws that go into the ground. So they're not a poured foundation. So it's not a very disruptive process in the sense that the screws just kind of go on the ground, the unit gets placed and is mechanically attached. It's not even welded together. There's like a mechanical attachment. And basically everything is contained in this like mechanical utility vault here. There's all of your like it's kind of like their utility room that sits kind of just below the unit. And so they kind of designed everything to be 12 foot. So all of their units are 12 feet wide, and then they just kind of get bigger. And then you can also, there's a couple that stack. And again, the goal is really to create efficient, high quality, durable units that would be good in smaller spaces as well. So the next several pages are basically all the different units that they have. So the first one is the smallest at 240 square feet. And then the next one, and this one actually has been the most popular in terms of the one that people are interested in the most. It's the Studio XL. So it's like slightly bigger than the Studio. It's at 288 square feet. It has a full bathroom, comes with full appliances, microwave with the range, stove, washer, dryer. And it's really designed kind of to be for like more of that like young professional, or even like an Airbnb for like short-term units. It's a good size for that. And like I said, everything is very durable, so it's like also good in the rental space as well. The next one is the one bedroom. This one comes with like the full bedroom off to like the one side, but you can also have like a Murphy bedroom or Murphy bed in the living space. So you could actually have like a 2-bed there. It's a tight space for 2, but it works. And then they have the 2-bedroom, which again is just a little bit longer. We lost a marker over here. Same thing, but just there's a bedroom on the other side. So you have the 2 beds on either side. And then I actually don't have it in this package, but they've started offering like a loft one where basically any of these you can then stack one with like a studio on top that has like a bedroom up top. So let's say you wanted like the 1 bedroom here, you can then stack it on top, and they have some designs for that as well. So they've launched just recently. We went to the National Home Show with them back in March. And then Justin was here in Windsor about a month ago now. And so again, we're trying to test this out in different markets across Canada, see what works, what feedback, that kind of thing. And it's been a really good partnership with them so far. On the site servicing piece, so if you go to the next page, most people ask, well, like what happens, how do they connect into services? All ADUs need to connect into, usually I should say, connect into the main dwelling. So this means like the sanitary sewer, the water line, electricity. Typically what happens is they run a trench, and then they just, so for example with mine, then they just drilled through the foundation, connect into the main plumbing stack. I've seen some municipalities, for whatever reason, they've said, no, you can't connect into the main dwelling. You have to connect directly to municipal services. That would just mean you have to dig a bigger trench to the main sewer line in the street. But that is rarer. I've only seen that like a handful of times, but like generally they connect into the main dwelling. But what we're coordinating is all those pieces. So like making sure that, we do an accurate site assessment up front so you can get an idea of what costs are needed, making sure that, everything is covered from that perspective. The project management, coordinating the drawings, submitting for permit, paying for municipal fees, and then also then after that, approval happens, delivery, and then crane and setting. So really, it can be like in and out in about 5 days in terms of like the crane, it's the foundation and the crane and everything like that. We usually say 1 to 2 weeks. So you can see on the next page, which is the timeline, that's just I didn't put actual like times associated, it's just more like the steps of the process. So you have an idea of kind of what happens. So we're kind of having these conversations with investors now. After that, we would do site assessment. We would give you a better rough cost estimate. We would kind of come to an agreement about all the moving pieces. Let's say we're working with one client right now in Windsor who we're negotiating on, like he wants to add a parking spot. So we're figuring out, okay, well, do you want us to do that or do you want to do that? Because then that adds to our site work, so then we have to add that to the agreement. So we're kind of going back and forth negotiating on that. Those are things that are possible with Laneway Homes. They're happy to do some of that additional work. From there, we submit the drawings for permit, and then hopefully municipal approvals happen fairly quickly. And then, like I said, the build and the site preparation work starts in parallel, and then the delivery and installation. Like I said, we're hoping for everything to be done in 3 to 4 months. So barring any sort of major catastrophe. With that being said, I did have this page. Were you able to print the spreadsheet that I sent, or did I not? Did I send that to you as well? Oh, okay. We'll have to email it out to the folks here. We did have an example spreadsheet of like what it would look like from the cash flow perspective and like the financing and everything like that. Really, our assumption is that you would be getting for like a studio unit, you could get like $1,200 a month. And I'm not as familiar with the rental market in Windsor. Because we're testing this out in like St. Catharines and in Hamilton, and we're also been doing some projects in Toronto. We've started some. We know that rent can be much higher in those markets, but in speaking with Dale and Marla, actually, we've gone back and forth about, depending on the neighborhood in Windsor, like what would be the rent. So we just gave it a scenario example, which I can send out. But the goal is really to get you to a positive net cash flow that you're kind of comfortable with and an ROI. And so because we really want to test some of the financial incentives with the construction financing, we're happy to kind of like negotiate and work with you on that as well. And then lastly, so yeah, I don't have that in front of me, but I will have to get you, I sent it out earlier and we can email it. And so lastly, so why do this? So I think this pilot program, I was saying to Chad earlier, backyard homes, I think we're at a really interesting kind of precipice where we're at the early adoption phase. So to a lot of people, these are like new idea. It's a new idea, even though they're an old concept, and they've been happening in other regions for, let's say, like a couple decades. And so our goal is to really kind of get people thinking about them in Windsor and really trying to have more of the units built. I'm passionate about it from a personal standpoint. I've seen the benefit to myself, but also from just the housing crisis that we're in. So we see this as a de-risked opportunity to install detached ADUs. One of the things that we see is like people are really hesitant to take the risk. They're very expensive. And yeah, you're building a house. So, you know, it's a lot to commit to. And so we're trying to take those a few elements of risk out of the process by creating financial incentives. As I mentioned, you can leverage existing equity while increasing your monthly cash flow. It's a new development without additional land acquisition, cost, or work. And then we also put in at the bottom, because some people, this is important to them, it's a PR opportunity or a talking piece where, you know, I think there could be more positive energy around the housing market in general, but we also want to showcase like what people are doing as creative solutions, how they're solving or providing solutions to the housing crisis. So we see this as an opportunity to tell those stories, both in Windsor, but then also across Ontario and the entire country. So that's kind of my main presentation and pitch. I'm happy to take questions, have a conversation. The last page just gives you some information. If you want to send, if you do have a couple properties that you're interested in, there's two things that you can do. One is you can just send me addresses for a site assessment, or you can look them up on resimate.build and see if you're able to figure out like, okay, I like these units. The discounted offer for the pilot program only applies to the Eden units, but we do have other models on our site. The Eden models we're just in the process of adding, so they should be on in the next couple of days. So you might not see them, so send me an email if you need anything. We also have a form, which is this long kind of website address there. You can actually book an on-site assessment. So if you're like, you know what, I know that I want to go ahead with this already, I'm going to book an on-site assessment. I will reach out to the site technician, his name's Andrew, and the two of us come out and we just do like we go through a big checklist and we check everything. And then that gives you an insight of like we can give you a cost estimate after that point. If you're interested in any of the financing options, we'll connect you directly to the financing director at Eden Dwellings. And if you're not interested in an Eden unit, you're interested in another unit, we do have another contact that we're working with, a company that does kind of like Rocket Mortgage, but they do digital mortgages in Canada, and they actually have a whole fund specifically for ADUs. Like they're really excited about them, so we're excited about that collaboration and partnership as well. And then lastly, we would then just require a deposit or a down payment depending on what route you take, and then we would be submitting for permits. So those are kind of the key next steps. And yeah, I'm happy to take questions, have discussion, and go from there. Yeah.
I came in late. Can you start again?
Oh my gosh. We're talking about backyard homes. You got it? Okay,
So you
thanks.
mentioned a couple of things there.
Sure.
Some of the adjustments in the financial field dealing with ADUs.
Yes, yeah.
In the last 5 years, since COVID and
Yeah.
everything else, what are some of the adjustments you're seeing being made as far as financial institutions legitimizing ADUs as a real thing that can be profitable?
Great
and
question.
effective?
Yeah, great question. So I would say the early movers in this space were the credit unions. And if you go to a credit union, they're generally a little bit more, malleable, I guess. And that's who I worked with. They were like very, very hesitant about my project, but they understood what I was going for and the bigger vision. And so credit unions can be they were kind of the early adopters in taking this risk. Now, with that being said, the major issue we are still seeing, but it's starting to change, is really the post-construction value. People were concerned that if they were going to go to be able to refi their project or their property, that they wouldn't get the value out of it to be able to pay off the construction loan because banks weren't recognizing the value of detached ADUs. Now what we're seeing, and I usually tell people this conservatively, is we're seeing the value of the detached ADU like just be added to whatever the appraised value was prior. So at the very least, you can get the money out to pay it off. But now we're starting to see banks being a little bit more open because there's no comps, there is no like sales of these kind of whole properties because you can't sever and sell the unit on its own. You have to sell the whole property, and we just weren't seeing those sales happen. Like I don't know that there has been even one or two in Windsor, like there might just be a couple, but I don't think there has been. And so banks are like, we don't really know how to value these. So what we're seeing is like whatever you paid for like the construction value, your post-construction is what gets added onto the mortgage, which at the very least you can then get your money out of the project to refi. So that is a big area of opportunity that I see moving forward. I can't say who, but we have had a really positive conversation with one of the big banks in Canada, and they're actually offering a new detached ADU policy specifically. They're hoping to launch it later in the year, and they are including modular in that, which we're really excited about. So they are as well. So we're starting, and I think once they launch their product, if somebody else doesn't go first, I think all of them will start to follow, because what I had been hearing over the last few years was, oh, I went back to like, I don't want to throw Scotia Bank under the bus, but like Scotia, and they were like, no, we're not gonna, we don't even want to touch that kind of a thing. So what that was doing is forcing people into like the private lending space, and which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but then the refinancing piece was the problem. Now we're seeing like those kind of things come together a lot more seamlessly. So, and the other thing like I said, we're working. We had a good contact with the company Perch, who are doing they do digital digitized mortgages, and they're also now lending on these ADUs as well. So, I see just in general the lending space opening up a little bit easier, the refinancing happening a little bit easier, and it's starting to kind of change. Hopefully that answered your question. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
When you did yours, how did you finance it? Did you do an equity takeout out of your house?
So great question. I actually had saved up, and I had a pretty big down payment, pretty much almost like half the build. I had saved up a lot of money from other stuff, and I just hadn't touched it. And I went to the credit union and said, I think it's going to cost me this is what my quote is. I have half of it paid for, so I just really need that extra little bit. And basically, because I had saved up so much and like I had a big enough down payment, they were able to do a construction loan that then refinanced into my whole mortgage. So yeah.
They do it like a draw?
Yeah, they did it like a draw. Yeah, they treated it like a construction loan. Yeah. So they basically, I had like 2 draws, and then at the end the appraiser came and it was all good. And that was they were great, Libro Credit Union. They didn't nobody knew exactly what was going to happen, but they kind of just treated it like it was like a big addition on your house. But it was hard because actually, sorry, and I could have added a little bit more to that. What we're also seeing now is some banks starting to recognize up to 80% of the expected rental income as well. So let's like on a purchase plus mortgage. So let's say you are looking at a property, it doesn't have a detached ADU, and you're like, oh, I want to put one in. I think I can get X rent from it. Once it's tenanted, they are recognizing the estimated rent as well. We're starting to see that but Libro wouldn't do that at the time. They wouldn't recognize the expected rent from it. So that's kind of the issue, is like building it before you get your rental income. But now lenders are starting to move in that direction, so as well. Yeah, Libro is great. Like I said, there's a bunch of lenders now who I can comfortably say they've dealt with ADUs, so they'll go in that direction. Yeah. Any other?
I have a question on zoning.
Go for it. Yeah, that's my true area of expertise.
What's the zoning gotta be? Like, let's say I've got a single
Yeah.
family on whatever,
Yeah.
Jeanette, and there's there's lane access there. So let's say you're gonna drop in the back and there's no garage there.
Yeah. What is it generally? Yeah.
Yeah.
So every municipality is different, and then even within municipalities, there's different districts. With that being said, Windsor is pretty straightforward, and I really like the way they do things because they have a blanket policy for the whole city, which is 4 feet setbacks from the sideline, and then the 4 feet from the rear yard property line. And then I think it's 8 feet from the main dwelling. I have to check that. And then basically those are your setbacks, and then you get your buildable area. But then you have to contend with lot coverage. So there's a total lot coverage, which is the whole percentage of the property you can take up, or there's then accessory lot coverage, which is accessory means any additional buildings. Like if you already have like exactly. Yeah. And that in Windsor, I think, is capped at 10%. I don't think they've changed that. So let's say you have like a 5,000 square foot lot, you can't build bigger than 500 square feet. Like you're already capped at that. So that really limits like smaller lots. For example, I got caught with that because I have like a 4,000 square foot lot for 4,300, which is why my unit is 430 square feet, because I maxed out like that. Yeah. I was like, I'm going to max this out. And Windsor also has a height restriction. So you can't build taller than the main dwelling, but they measure the height of the main dwelling as the midpoint between the peak and the soffit. So it's like the midpoint of the roof line. So if you have a very steep roof, it'll be the midpoint. If you have a shallow roof, it'll be the midpoint. So the idea is that the secondary building will always be shorter than the main building for privacy reasons. That is also while I understand it from like a neighborhood perspective, it can be limiting for having 2-story units, because even if you have a 2-story house, you're like, why can't I build? It's because that midline really gets people. So I wasn't also able to build a 2-story because of that, which was fine. I have nice cathedral ceilings, and I find that it ends up working out for a lot of people anyway. But generally the zoning is it's different in every city. So what my team did actually when we built the tool that we have, the mapping tool, we created like a standardized system where we took all the zoning bylaws, we did a bunch of research, and we created like an input tool, which basically is like a flow chart to say like, okay, does it meet the environmental considerations? Does it meet X, Y, and Z? And it goes through this like system, and then it says, okay, yes, it meets all these requirements. Okay, let's map the buildable area. Let's see if it fits. Like, what would that be? And so we did this whole tool. There's like a team of 10 of us that did it. So if you have questions about other cities, but we tried to map it in a really simple way so that people could then say, oh, there's my buildable area. Okay, that's my max size. Perfect. Like then they know where they can build and what's the biggest size that they can go. So that's kind of how we did it. Yeah, planning is my where I'm at. So I'm less on the financing side of things. Any other questions or thoughts?
I have more, I just don't want to take all.
You're doing
ahead. Yeah, yeah, Yeah.
If you wanted to do a garage
yeah.
with a second story on it being your ADU, does that double your square footage? Or it's still based on like a bird's eye view, kind of 10% of the whole area? And making the assumption that it's lower than the halfway up the rafters of the primary house.
Yeah, so if you have a garage on the bottom,
Yeah.
it doesn't count towards your gross floor area, which is technically the interior square footage.
Okay.
And no, it wouldn't, like your lot coverage is your lot coverage. They literally just measure it from the aerial view.
Gotcha.
So no, it wouldn't do that either.
So from a lot coverage
Yeah.
perspective, it would be fine.
Yeah. Actually, there is an ADU, like, is this oak or elm? Elm? Okay, there's actually a 2-story ADU. Oh, do you know
I
that?
saw it
Yeah.
because I listed a property on note.
Yeah.
And that came out as a compare, but I'm like, that is not.
We could go on a field trip and I'll show you it. But yeah, it's a 2-story. It has a garage on the bottom and it's 430 square feet. I actually knew the person who lived in it. She actually lives in mine now because she moved in there and then her and her fiance got married and they moved into mine. And I was like, of course, the 2 tiny home people in the city like lived.
So
Yeah.
is it connected through the garage then, and they go up?
No, they have
External
external
staircase.
staircase and then they have like a 2-car garage on the bottom.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and they were able to do that because the main dwelling is like a 2-story with like an upper like
With
loft.
a decent size attic.
Yeah, yeah. I forget the address, but yeah. But literally, if you literally go down the alley and you drive, you'll see it. Like you can't miss it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gray but yeah.
Interesting. Now,
Yeah.
was the garage pre-existing there and then they built the unit?
No,
or
it's
not?
brand
They
new.
did it all
Yeah,
together?
they did it all together. Yeah,
The
yeah,
inside is beautiful.
yeah. It's really nice. Yeah,
I'm like, whoa.
yeah. It's really nice. Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm assuming it would be difficult to just drop it on top of an existing garage because the foundation would be
Surprisingly,
built for
yes.
a garage,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
the
That's
two-story.
nice to meet you as well. No problem. Surprisingly, yes. Most people are like, "Oh, I'll just convert the garage," and it's like actually, it's really hard because if it's an older garage, the footings are usually not appropriate for like 2-story, like all that. So yeah, you have to consider all those
I'm
things.
sure there are people converting their garages to ADUs though as well, right?
Yeah, yeah, there are. I've seen them a couple in Hamilton. I know somebody in Hamilton who helps people do the garage conversions. They can be quite complex because one of the issues is insulation. Usually you need like 2x6 framing, and usually old garages aren't 2x6. They're usually like 2x4 or something. So you have to actually reframe the whole thing anyway, and then your footings aren't usually good enough. So yeah, yeah, yeah. There's the conversions in like can be just as expensive as new. Sometimes I tell people it'd just be easier to start from
If you
scratch.
didn't have a garage at all, exactly. That's
Yeah.
and that was the conversation I was having with a friend of mine.
Yeah.
I told him, I'm like, it doesn't make sense to do anything to your garage.
Yeah.
You're going to be undoing work to redo work.
Yeah, you have to
Right.
underpin the footings, you have to do all that stuff. Yeah, yeah.
It wouldn't make
Yeah.
it wouldn't make any sense. I don't.
I do know garage conversions that are happening for around like 80 to 100K, and that's like more like I would say in the realm of like possibility if you already have like 400 square feet. But like adding on top of it would add probably like you could just get a new one. Like yeah, at that
Like
point.
if it was doable, I'd no question be
Yeah.
interested to drop a second story on the garage. My garage is probably 20 feet by 25 wide.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
sizable, but
It'd just be
I
too
wouldn't
hard.
be
Yeah.
confident in how much it could support underneath there.
Yeah,
anyways.
you would have to get like a structural engineer to verify it anyway. So yeah, So,
If you
yeah.
have an existing, say, structure, shed, garage, whatever,
yeah.
and somebody's going to you and saying, hey, I want to put a modular unit in my yard, or wherever the space may be, do you guys actually handle what's going to be done with that existing structure that needs to go? Or is that more so on the foundation?
So we would consider that part of the site work, and so if you wanted us to deal with it, we would then be like, yeah, we'll get rid of the garage and we'll contract that out for sure. We do the same thing if like there's a big tree in the way, like it's just part of the site preparation work of it. So yeah, definitely willing to do that. Generally, I find that like if people are in the property investment space, they might already have contacts or people that can do it, and we're fine with that too, like whatever it takes. So it just depends, kind of like that's what we're doing right now with, like I said, that one individual in Windsor who's looking at like adding a driveway. We had to take some trees down, like that kind of stuff. So, yep. Yeah. Any other thoughts or questions?
I can see the sewage utility being a tough one.
You mean trenching?
Yeah.
Going, in what way?
Well, I mean, the whole thing, if you
Yeah.
tie into the house, clearly.
Yes,
That's
yeah.
a far better solution.
Yeah, yeah,
If
yeah.
you had to go out to the road, like.
It's ridiculous, yeah,
you'd have-
sorry,
like,
yeah.
Are you chewing up the asphalt in the road?
Yeah, it like, and because if you have like, if you're on tight lots,
Yeah.
like sometimes you don't even have that much space in between houses.
Right.
But in Windsor, I haven't ever seen that happen yet. We saw it happen in Brantford.
Yeah.
So I don't know why that particular instance the municipality required that, but in Windsor you can just tie in. I think it has probably something to do with the size of your sanitary sewer pipe. I think it has to be 4 inches wide.
Okay.
But a lot of people might have 3-inch. And so I think the issue is that if you don't have a wide enough pipe, you have to then pipe to the city. Yeah, that's my, like, I'm not a plumber, so rudimentary knowledge, but I think that's where it becomes a problem. But to
So
the,
in Windsor, they're okay if you tie into the house, assuming.
you have the right size. Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah, yeah. And I didn't find it like too disruptive. I mean, I don't have a finished basement. I'm in an old house. And I did have to move my electrical stack though. It was on the wrong side of the house, so I had to like move it to the other side. But again, it wasn't like an insurmountable challenge. They just run a new line. Like I ran that line, and then they ran a new line to the ADU, and it was fine. So.
Why'd they make you move sides?
It was just because I wouldn't have had the clearance then, because it was like basically the line was where the ADU is, and I wasn't going to have the clearance. The wire would have hit the house.
Top,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, because it comes from the
Yeah.
alley and those.
Exactly, yeah. So I had to move it so I would have the clearance from the roof line. So,
Gosh.
yeah, hydro lines, people don't realize can pose a lot of problems. But if, like, you need the clearance, but if you can easily move it, then it's not that big of a deal.
I mean,
So,
mine literally sits on top of my garage.
yeah.
I didn't do it, I didn't install it.
Yeah, you're not supposed, yeah, exactly. Yeah, they would be like, you can't do that. It's so funny because I talked to a homeowner in Toronto, and Toronto has really strict fire access requirements because they have a contract that's going to be really like complex, but they have small fire trucks that don't go very far, and so you have to have a certain range from the fire hydrant. And it's like this weird thing that like sometimes in the back they don't make it. So this one lady had to put in an entire reservoir just to comply with the fire access because the fire truck range was too far. Yeah. Yeah. And she was like, this makes no sense. The fire truck now, she realized, doesn't even meet her like main house. She's like, my ADU is like basically better protected. She was like, now if there's a fire in my main house, I'm going to use my reservoir over here to put out this fire. But then it only dawned on her that like half the city doesn't have good fire access in Toronto. So that's a huge problem in Toronto is like their fire requirements. Whereas in Windsor, we generally have like decent fire access, so it's not an issue at all. Yeah. So. Yeah, different problems in different municipalities. So, any other questions? You guys good? Okay, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, and again, happy to have any conversations with people who are interested. So, thank you for coming. Oh, thanks. Okay. Yeah.